4 years and 100 interviews with entrepreneurial women and men from this region. They worked hard, they're grateful, they give back, and they share the secrets of success with the next generation. Welcome to Season 4 of the Northeast Pennsylvania Business Journal.
We've interviewed 100 people in the Business Journal series. Now we'd like you to meet Douglas Fink, President and CEO of Pennsylvania Paper and Supply Company. Doug is the third generation to run this business, and he's proud of father and grandfather who preceded him. It all started in 1922 with a horse and a wagon.
Douglas Fink, President of Pennsylvania Paper and Supply and Sovereign Commercial Services, among some other businesses in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and a product of two entrepreneurial families. My grandfather started the company in 1922. His father ran a general store in Taylor, so he had an entrepreneurial instinct. And my grandfather on my mother's side had a company in New York City. They lived in Brooklyn. And he sold personal hygiene products and traveled all over the world. Actually wrote a book about those experiences.
This was your grandfather?
My grandfather on my mother's side.
He wrote a book about it?
Right. So 45 years globetrotting around the world by Harry Ain.
Well, Doug, tell us about yourself personally. Who are you?
I grew up in, again, a family with a small business, and it was always about entrepreneurial opportunities. So I worked in the business probably from the moment I could walk, and spent a tremendous amount of time there growing up. In fact, I remember being 7 years old and in first or second grade, and taking pencils off the shelf and selling them in to my classmates. Of course, my cost of goods was zero, which was always helpful.
Let's let my audience really get to know you. You didn't go to college.
I did not, actually.
And you don't regret that. And I want to get to the heart of that, because several of the hugely successful entrepreneurs my audience has met also did not go to college, and might not, or in many cases would not have had the opportunities they had they gone.
Probably a similar situation with me as well. I did attend Wyoming Seminary in high school, prep school, and even though I was from Scranton, I did board there. So I had the college experience, somewhat. It wasn't the same thing. You didn't have quite as many freedoms as you have going to college. But academics and I didn't necessarily connect all that well. I love to learn, still love to learn. I learn new things every day. It just, I like to learn what I want to in my own terms, instead of being told by a
well put
by a curriculum.
Now, are you going to make sure that your kids, you have how many children?
I have 3 children.
You have 3. Are you going to make sure your children go to college?
Absolutely.
Are you going to insist
My
on that?
oldest is graduating in December from Bay State College in Boston.
So
he is.
Did Dad?
And the other 2 are definitely going to college.
Is Dad insisting on that? Will you entertain the notion that your dad had to?
Unfortunately, I think in this country, a college degree today is somewhat like a high school diploma was years ago. The education system has been watered down to the point where you almost need to go to college just to learn the basic skill set to survive, let alone thrive.
So your kids are definitely going to college.
Yeah, it's not like it was 30 years ago.
Tell us about, you did tell us a little bit about Jacob. He's the founder. Your grandfather, in 1922, he's age 23, and he creates a business. He sees a business need. What's the business need Jacob sees?
There were many corner grocery stores. That was all that existed in those days, the food distribution model. And he saw an opportunity to essentially sell bags, grocery bags, and deliver them to all the different stores. So it was a single product business. And
was he manufacturing the bags?
No, always distribution.
I see.
Most things we did not make. There were some things along the way where we dabbled in some manufacturing, but mostly all wholesaling. So he would take these bags and sometimes even with a horse and wagon in Scranton, deliver them to the various grocery stores, and one product led to 2, and 2 led to 3, and fortunately, by the Depression, we were strong enough and had enough of a base that the company was able to make it through.
Okay.
Although those years were interesting because remember the stories, unloading boxcars, and all that was available to pay the workers in some days was a shot of whiskey and $1.
And the workers stayed.
And they did, yes. That was one thing about my family is we always believe in long-term relationships, always have. We have employees with us now, and that's really who the true heroes are, the people that contributed to produce almost 90 years continuously in business. But we have our oldest, I hate to call him our oldest individual because he's not actually on the payroll, but he's with us almost 50 years, working almost 50 years. We started Easter Monday, 1964, Al Gillette.
Let's reestablish your credential. President and CEO, Pennsylvania Paper and Supply Company. I'm going to use a hackneyed expression, touchy-feely, to differentiate you, Doug, from the prior two generations. And how do I support that? Well, we were talking about core values, some of the things that you deeply believe in that are probably new generationally to your business. I want to talk to you about that, but let's get started by saying that you were nominated by who?
My Vice President of People and Culture, Linda Nini.
Linda Nini, and she did not ask your permission to nominate you.
Did not, much to my chagrin.
All right, what does that mean?
Well, you know, there are thousands of people that contributed to the success of the various companies that we have, and 150 employees currently on the payroll. But over the years, I mean, the stakeholders in the company, from suppliers to thousands of customers and employees, to say that one person is really responsible for any of that. All I do is you know, keep an eye on things and try to predict what the most important next two things are going to be.
Were you always that wise, or did you stumble into that knowledge?
It was probably born of adversity. When I came into the business in 1985, again right out of high school, my dad, first of all, I didn't start in the core business. There was a small portion of the business selling copiers and imaging equipment, and I really wanted to cut my teeth and got involved in sales and wanted to build my own part of it. So I started to build the copier division, which actually went very well and was very successful until about 4 years later. The person who I was doing this with in the business had some personal problems and unfortunately, out of the blue, committed suicide. Oh. So getting a call one day by the state police to come and identify the body, and he had become a personal friend of mine, let alone the person that was really providing the technical knowledge on how to fix the copiers. So that was a very interesting experience after spending all these years building this up and back to square one. So we recovered from that, and we ended up selling that division off and then eventually buying it back. With another partner from a different company. So it still survives to this day, actually, as Copy Plus.
Copy Plus. Was that your greatest adversity to date?
Not even close.
Not even close.
No.
Adversity builds character, you agree?
I would agree with that.
Give us an example.
Well, just to, during those years, my father made a large bet, a gamble in a new business that he really didn't know anything about, and it didn't work out. He lost a tremendous amount of money. Essentially, all the capital that the family had put together for the previous, I guess, 70 years or 65 years, pretty much gone. Not to mention, left us with a tremendous amount of debt. So I had to, cleaning up that mess along with my dad was quite a challenge. There were many issues, and it was extremely difficult, and took really, you know, very many years to recover from that situation.
How long had you been in the business when this happened?
About 4 years.
Only 4 years.
Only 4 years.
Shortly after the copier, copy?
It was almost exactly the same time. You know,
incredible.
It either rains or it pours.
Yes, it does. I hope it's been raining.
It's been, yeah, well, Feast or famine.
Feast or famine.
But along with the changing marketplace in those years, there was lots of, we had an office supply component that went away as some of the catalog companies were coming into their own, and Staples and Office Max. That went away completely. Again, we had a tremendous amount of debt, which was not asset-based. So one of the novel ways that we dealt with that is we actually, best defense is a good offense. So we acquired a competitor, and were able to leverage their assets to term out and essentially make that debt manageable, get it down to where it was serviceable, as well as grow the business at the same time. So we're fortunate in 1993 that came together.
How are you? You've already differentiated yourself from your father. By the way, were you, after only 4 years in the business, were you consulted on the decision your father made to buy that business?
My father was a wonderful individual. He was the kindest, gentlest, sweetest man you'd ever want to know, which served him well during the years that he was in business, but unfortunately sometimes made him too trusting. One of the things that he did is really, even when I would ask kids advice on what do you think we should do, he would say, you've got to make your own mistakes, you've got to learn. And he said, you do the best thing, you exercise good judgment, and you don't need me. And he pretty much relegated himself and gave up that control, even though he still was working in the business only up until even a few years ago before he died.
Has that adversity, which almost sank the company,
Yeah.
Made you a more conservative businessman?
It taught me a tremendous amount of lessons. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm very conservative, but I'm very conservative when it comes to things that I'm not comfortable with, where I don't have direct knowledge or a good feel for the marketplace. There's no problem making bets on things that you don't know anything about, as long as they're small, bite-sized bets. And granted, they may pay off, but if they don't, you're not betting the farm on things that you don't know. There are times to bet the farm, and there are times to not bet the farm, and you've got to know the difference.
Can we call that the lesson of your business life?
I would probably say that was the defining characteristic that really formulated how I approach just about everything that I do.
And you have siblings.
I do. I have two siblings.
Are they in the business?
Lisa and Stacy. Neither are in the business. One is a nurse practitioner. She lives in Pittsburgh with her physician husband, and another is a teacher by profession and recently moved to Florida. But neither of them grew up or really were in the business. So it was my dad. You can't introduce a child. You can't tell a child what to become interested in or what to do. It's there for my kids if they're interested in it, but they need to find their own way in life and do whatever makes them happy. If there's if they want to come into the business and they really enjoy it and they want to do it, that's great. I'm not ever going to force my children to do anything that's not going to bring them satisfaction.
Is that the same, is that the identical message, almost word for word, that Jacob or your dad gave you?
Yes. He really, created the opportunity for me. My mother was much more rooted in academics and was hopeful that I would be a doctor or a lawyer, as most mothers are.
Disappointed that you didn't?
And, I think in the beginning, but given the experiences that we went through and the adversity, I think relieved, because my dad really did need the help.
It says here that in my notes that this period in the 1960s, you really grew the company. Or your dad was still living.
Right.
Your dad really grew the company in northeastern Pennsylvania, despite the fact that we had a real downturn here in the 60s. Coal mining is gone, and the economy of northeastern Pennsylvania is changing profoundly. How does Pennsylvania Paper and Supply Company thrive?
Well, I think just like all children, they wanted to do something a little different to differentiate themselves from their parents. So when he came into the business after World War II, he introduced janitorial sanitary supply products and equipment. And really that took us through the 50s, 60s, and 70s and solidified us. We still always maintained our packaging origins, industrial packaging, but the business actually took on more of the janitorial sanitary supply characteristics than packaging as the years went by. We've since gone back to our roots a few years ago, and we've really made some good investments in industrial packaging and built out that part of the business.
How much credit for growth, expansion, success do you take?
Oh, I think if you keep your house in order and make sure you're well positioned, continually invest in the business so that you have the wherewithal to exploit opportunities when they come along, the rest takes care of itself.
Yeah, modesty.
Yeah,
That's a consistent behavioral characteristic of the people I interview on this show, modesty.
In my opinion, the most important facet of leadership is incredible humility. There are nobody who, from any position in the company, down from the whatever the rank is or whatever their position is, nobody's better than.
You're not going to tell us what
else.
the bottom rung is, are you?
No, certainly
because there's no
not.
such thing in your business.
There's no such. Everybody has an opinion, and it's all valued. And we, even though they don't always express it, sometimes we have to drag it out of them. They're such tremendous people, and they work so hard. I mean, they deliver ice melt and rock salt in the dead of winter on trucks in every type of weather condition, freezing cold. I mean, these people, I cannot tell you how hard they work at night and on the weekends. I mean, it's really to them that we owe our success.
You're a very compassionate man. Let's go back to Linda Nini for a minute. She nominates you for this interview. She doesn't ask your permission. Your word was chagrined. How did you find out about it, and how did you deal with Lynn?
She essentially kind of told me that this might be happening, although I think it was a done deal by that point, just to get me used to the concept a little bit. So she knows I'm not real comfortable talking about myself.
You're doing fine.
No, I'm thanks to some excellent coaching. But
thank you. She is VP of what?
Of People and Culture.
Now there's an unusual title, VP of People and Culture. Mm-hmm. Is that? Tell us what that is.
Essentially, exactly what it is. It's instead of human resources, which most companies have, it's all about people and culture. So they're not human resources; they're people, and I can't take credit for that. A mentor of mine, Chuck Cohen from Benco Dental, is the real genius behind that.
We're going to interview Chuck this year.
Wonderful.
Yes.
There are no the Cohens of Benco Dental.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't make people better than that. They've helped us.
We interviewed Dad last year. You know.
I'm aware of that. Yeah, they're phenomenal individuals, and again, much of our success, I give credit to everybody else, but they are definitely
and they have
huge
that position or something very similar.
That's exactly where
people and culture.
Yes, I gratuitously borrowed it from.
Gratuitously,
right.
Core values. It seems that this generation, if I may, Doug, yes, more than the prior generations, and you're very proud of your father and of your grandfather, but what would your father, and particularly grandfather Jacob, would have said? What would they have said about this concept of core values?
I think the core values always existed. They were just more inherently a part of our culture in those years. And I've referred to them in some of our marketing materials over the years as handshake values.
But you printed them, you wrote them down.
I codified them. It's not that they didn't exist. I think that any business has to have a set of ideals.
Yeah, but there's a difference here. You wrote them down.
I did.
You articulated them.
Right. So the core values are customer focused, always honest, reliance on facts.
Let's take them slowly.
Okay.
Always honest speaks for itself. Reliance on facts.
Yes.
What's that mean?
That means if there's a situation, don't put a spin on it. Let's deal with the facts as we find them, and address calmly and rationally address the situation and take the emotion out of it. Emotion is the spin, and you're essentially leading us in a direction or to make a decision that you want us to go in, instead of just being objective about the facts that exist.
Expectations set high.
Yes.
Do you go through a lot of people in pursuit of that?
Not as many as you think. We are, again, long-term relationships are important, so I like low turnover. Yeah. There's such a thing as too low of turnover as well. But we've got 35-year warehouse people and 30-year truck drivers.
Attitude to win.
Right.
Is that different in any way than what all of us think every day?
I think it's important to go about your responsibilities. This is a battle against our competition.
Speaks to competition.
That's right, and you're trying to beat them before they beat you, so it's very important to...
One more I want to talk about, opportunities for all. You are an equal opportunity employer.
Correct.
You have women in senior management, you have African Americans.
We do.
Latinos.
Yes.
Do you seek people out for opportunity like that?
We certainly, to the extent we possibly can. Again, the demographics of the valley are the demographics of the valley, but it's a meritocracy. It's about the best and the brightest, and in many cases that is the best and the brightest.
How do you find them? Best and the brightest?
Trial and error, usually. You make
getting better at it over time?
I'd like to think so, but there's a certain amount of potluck involved.
Why did Linda Nini want you to do this? I wish she was here to ask.
I wish she were here to ask.
You have to be immodest for a moment and tell me what she told you was her reason.
I would have to speculate.
You're not going to do it.
Reliance on facts, remember?
Reliance on facts. Let's talk about airplanes. I really wanted to get to this, and you have a great story. You're engaged to be married. It's the year 2000. You're a pilot, and we have 5 minutes. So we're going to talk about airplanes and scuba diving, because I want to learn who this man, Doug Fink, is. But you had a life-threatening, life-changing experience piloting an airplane that actually you wrote an article about in a piloting magazine. You called it the luckiest day of my life. Tell us about that.
That's an appropriate description. We were flying back home, again, single-engine aircraft, from Connecticut, and had just leveled off at about 8,000 feet. And the oil temperature started to climb towards redline. And I wasn't sure what was going on, and contacted New York Approach and ready to declare an emergency. Right then, the engine completely blew itself up, and smoke poured into the cabin, oil sprayed all over the windshield.
Similar to the World War II.
Very much so.
Where the so oil spills onto the window and smoke comes into the engine.
Smoke is streaming.
Except that those pilots bailed
parachutes, and they could bail out. We didn't have that luxury. So that was not an option, unfortunately. I think my wife, or my fiance at the time, would have. She said if she had a parachute, she might have left us.
She would have left you
right,
there.
Right.
Single parachute by Doug.
So, needless to say, it was a hair-raising situation, but we successfully made a 12-mile glide blind.
No engine?
No engine.
12-mile glide.
Yeah.
Where did you land?
New Haven, Connecticut, on the runway.
You couldn't, on the runway, and you couldn't see the runway.
I could not. I had to actually fly sideways.
You flew the plane sideways so you could look out the side window.
Out the side window.
Did you then straighten it out as you?
At the last second, apparently, because I'm here and there was no damage to the aircraft.
A miracle, right?
I would have to say that, yeah.
But you do, in your article, again, take credit's too strong a word. You don't want to do
credit.
that. But you prepared yourself.
Yes. My instructor said pilots make their own luck by preparing. Although there's definitely an element of luck in everything that we do in life. Sometimes fortune favors the foolish. Sometimes it doesn't. But in this situation, the outcome was good. And I didn't know the statistic at the time, but apparently a situation like this has less than 10% survivable outcome.
Oh my!
Which
now that's not in your article.
It's not in the article, and I read that in the book after the fact. Let alone aggravating circumstances like we had. So I'm happy I didn't know that statistic at the time. Don't tell the bumblebee it can't fly.
You got back into in an airplane in 2 weeks.
I did.
That had to be difficult.
It was very difficult. It was a different experience, not as enjoyable as it had been, and it took me many years to get over it.
I'll bet it did.
But I'm back in the saddle again.
I want to mention, just for a minute, and we only have a few moments, that you, for 3 years, were a volunteer pilot for Angel Flight.
Yes.
And you said that was a very moving experience for you.
To be able to provide transportation to disadvantaged families and children, most of whom had cancer. So you were picking them up in rural areas and flying them to a major population center like Boston or New York for treatment was hugely rewarding. I mean, you don't realize how fortunate. You don't take any. I never take anything for granted, but to be exposed to children who are in this situation, fighting for their lives, and see the look of appreciation on their faces for something as small as things that we would do on a routine basis, just flying from point A to point B. On a volunteer basis was incredibly rewarding. I'll never forget every single child that came into that plane. I'll never forget them.
You have since sold your planes.
I have. Years ago after that incident, but I am looking to get back into aviation.
You're going to do it again.
I think I'm going to do it again. My kids, the little ones now love it. I've taken them up.
Your wife was in the plane that almost crashed.
She was.
Will she go in it again?
She did, only because the kids were with us.
I see.
She's not going to stay on the ground and watch us go. She says, if we're going, we're all going together.
Will you ever parachute out of a plane?
You know, I don't see why you would want to parachute out of a perfectly good airplane.
I gave my son that gift for Father's Day.
That's wonderful. That's as long as the aircraft is functioning perfectly, I'm not jumping out of it.
Let's talk about scuba diving.
Yeah,
tell me about scuba diving.
Again, it's a phenomenal activity. The nice thing about flying and scuba diving is they require so much concentration when you're doing the activity that you're unable to think about anything else. And that's really the diversion. That's the allure for it. For me, anyway. It's just nothing like going to a tropical ocean and going into the water and a little bit of sensory deprivation. It helps cure a lot of ills.
Tell me your greatest regret, if you have one.
Ooh, I really don't have
You're a totally
very many
positive
regrets.
thinker, aren't you?
I try to be. It's the alternative is one thing I've. Many people in some of the situations that I've gone through, there were times when you wanted to give up. But when you think about the number of people depending on you, family, stakeholders, banks, suppliers, customers, employees, you can't let them down. You have to just keep going. So I always tried to do the best I could with what I had where I was. And are there things I would have done differently? Yes, but at the time, hindsight's always 20/20. So at that particular moment, that's the best thing to do.
Are you one of the, again, 10%, I've been told, who know how lucky they are to go to work and love going to work?
I would say that I have to be in that. There's so much in my life that I'm very grateful for, that I've got to be probably in the 1%.
1%.
Who understand how fortunate they really are.
It's a pleasure interviewing you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the
Thank you
conversation.
very much, Bill. Appreciate it.
Next week here on the Business Journal, Doug Gay of Gay's True Value Hardware in Tunkhannock tells us how his grandfather started that business in 1913. Doug was a high school sports star and has gone on to become one of Tunkhannock's leading businessmen. Marcella Shale is huge where Doug Gay lives, and he has some opinions. And then you'll meet Jack Teig, founder, president, and CEO of TMG Health. He's the local man who brought over 1,300 jobs to our region.